you for joining another Dietitian Talk. This is a live Dietitian Talk with all the Mary's Health dietitians. I shouldn't say all. Some can make it, some can't. Usually we're all here, but here we are. Here we are. For those that don't know, my name is James Marin, Integrative Registered Dietitian, Environmental Nutritionist.
I'm Delia Marin, Integrative Gut Health Dietitian, and we're the co-founders Married to Health.
And then we're joined with Katie. You can...
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie. I'm a licensed registered dietitian, and I'm also a PhD student studying nutrition interventions and cancer during chemotherapy.
And I'm Laura Sanchez, also known as the Emotional RD. I'm a licensed registered dietitian, and I also do emotional release.
Love it. And so the topic for today, we decided to go with organic or certified organic, or depending where you're watching, right? You may be in a different country. In the EU, it's a little bit different. In the United States, it's a little bit different. In South America, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic. And really we put out there, should you be eating organic? What about organic makes it special? Is it a marketing gimmick? You know, there's so many different, I guess, what do you want to call them, myths or opinions or context out there. So we wanted to discuss this because we are, I could say I am for sure very, very interested in organic. I just love the environmental aspects when it comes to gut health and just overall human microbiome. So it's very, very interesting. I think even though we're each a little bit different in our specialty, we all can give really cool context and a perspective to this topic. So we're really excited. This is also live. If you're watching this live, whether you're on Facebook or in a Facebook group or on YouTube, wherever you're watching this, if you're live, we can see your questions. So if you put a question down below, we want to check out your questions. We're starting with questions from our Good Gut members, first and foremost. These are members of our Good Gut group through our practice. We're going to start with those questions. We have some other really great questions that we found or that came in through other channels as well, but then we'll also see your questions live. So I think first and foremost, I kind of have a little intro here. I just want to give a little bit of context as an intro. One thing that a phrase that was coined that I can't really take credit for, but it's just a really simple phrase of little things matter. And this was coined by a researcher at UC Irvine. He's I always butcher his last name, but Bruce Lanphier. He's a researcher. He's a PhD. He's just a really brilliant individual. And he started actually a group called Little Things Matter. And they do advisory work when it comes to pediatric health and toxic chemical exposure. So he just coined the simple phrase, little things matter, especially with kids. So this is really a hot topic for mothers and families, but really for anybody, because when we think of kids, we think of infants, we think of toddlers. Where are they? They're on the floor, they're crawling, they're putting things in their mouth. When we think of something called body burden, typically the body burden is heavier in the pediatric and pregnant populations for a number of reasons. That's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, but for a number of reasons. So just wanted to put that out there. And little things do matter. We know now the science, and again, if there's any questions on this or just for clarification, but the science is pretty clear where it's like the idea of the dose makes the poison doesn't always transfer across all types of chemicals, right? We know even in small doses of certain pesticides, they can have drastic effects on the physiology of our body. I won't go too long into this. We'll continue to go down, but just wanted to start there and then open it up. Any comments or anything to add from anyone on that?
No, I feel like I'm excited for this topic because I think there's a lot of misconception around organic with it always being more expensive. And that's not always the case. In many instances, you can find organic packaged foods that are either comparable in price, sometimes less expensive than conventional counterparts. And then, I think there are also misconceptions around and guilt around eating organic or eating conventional and accessibility. And I think some people feel like, well, if I can't access it organic or if I can't afford it organic, I should just not eat it. And, I think we're here to talk about those things today. So that way, we're really addressing these questions, concerns, guilt, shame, because it does really it touches our food. So it's a topic that we really feel passionate about addressing because we get asked about it so often. I don't know about you, Katie and Laura, but I know organic is something that comes up almost daily when I'm speaking with my patients.
Yeah, likewise with my patients as well, especially in the cancer community, that those patients that are sort of dealing with a lot of really intense emotions around diagnoses, that they really just want to do what will set them up for as much success or even control what they can put in their bodies. So it is a really pertinent conversation that we have often.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think something that you mentioned that I really liked is the little things matter. And it's about like, it's impossible to live a toxic free, life in today's world. I mean, we just have to accept that, right? But once we have the knowledge, and I think that once we know, then we can maybe mitigate and reduce our toxic load. And sometimes organic is a good way to reduce that load, but like Dalia was saying, sometimes accessibility is not, you know. So it's just like balancing it out, and overall, as long as you're doing certain things in other areas, and then you can have other type of produce, but then we can also share other types of strategies that may help you.
Yep. I agree. And a lot of these questions are really great, and they touch on a lot of these topics. So
Yes.
I wanna kind of dive in to our first question that we received. Is produce stating organic grown in other countries really organic? I heard it's not, like bananas. I don't buy organic bananas. Great question. So the question overall is, if it's coming from another country like Ecuador or China or Chile, is it organic? Is it still the same as certified organic? So the context here is that the USDA certified organic is run by the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. Now, we also make treaties with other countries. The EU is a great example. They have a very similar, if not actually, the EU is a little more stringent on its policies and procedures with organic than the US. So we go, hey, this is a great fit. If we export or you import, great. We get along great. We made this kind of treaty, if you will, or agreement, and let's do it. No problem. The label gets, again, if we're importing things from the EU, it gets the certified organic label, no problem. If we're exporting, it gets I forget, theirs looks a little different. It's called something different, but it gets their label. It's organic. Great. Now, where that can be an issue is, let's say if it's other countries with less stringent policies, it's up to the USDA to then properly inspect, and I guess you could say oversee things coming in that say they're organic and set up the proper agreements. Now, can this be manipulated? Yeah. Can things be overlooked? Yes. And this happened. There was a lot of controversy not too long ago with like Whole Foods with this, or certain like big distributors of organic produce. But a simple answer to this is, I think those with the organic label are doing their best to certify organic. Is it going to be perfect? No. And if anything, where I kind of default is going, this is where buying local and kind of getting to know who's growing food in your area is great, because that is a wonderful way you can add extra layers of protection and go, oh, this is what it says it is, whether it's certified organic locally, or someone down the street that's growing whatever, papaya, or growing carrots, or whatever it is, and you can actually go and visit them or go to the farmer's market. There are farmers who aren't certified organic, and they'll show you pictures of their farm and go, hey, we don't use pesticide, or this is how we do things. So I know it's hard, like it's not so black and white of going like, yes, imported things are great and they're certified. Yes, they try to be, but there is some overlap in terms of, can it get kind of washed out, or can people do kind of shady things? Sure, it happens all the time. So I don't know if anything to add to that, but yeah, that's kind of the answer for that one.
And I think,
Yeah.
it brings up a good topic. And I know we were chatting about this earlier. So, Laura, I'd love for you to chime in because you're the one who brought this up of,
Mhm.
a lot of the times we also will ask our farmers at the farmers market, hey, do you use pesticides? And
Yeah.
they'll say, oh, I use this algae based herbicide or, bug repellent, or I don't use anything, but I'm not certified organic because it's super expensive. It's thousands and thousands of dollars a year to become certified organic. Or if they have a farm that's located near a conventional farm, if any of that pollen or seeds, or if any of that blows into their field, and then when they come for an inspection, when the USDA comes for an inspection and that's detected, they can be fined additional thousands and thousands of dollars. So that is where, we do encourage that relationship. So you can inquire, what are you using on your food? Is there anything synthetic? Because, there very well could be. And there could be in things that are labeled USDA organic in the store as well. The USDA organic label allows for about 25 synthetic pesticides still. But we know that, that's much lower than conventional. Conventional farming allows for 900 plus synthetic chemicals, and these can all be mixed together. And, we're just not really sure how they work together. But, nonetheless, I think it's always a good conversation to have. And whether it's buying from the farmer's market or buying from Whole Foods, there are those phone numbers on the back of your foods for that reason, where maybe you are someone who's had this reaction to certain pesticides. And I've had patients who say, I literally have an allergic reaction to these things. You can call that number and inquire, hey, what pesticides are being utilized on your crops, even if you are labeled as organic? Because again, it doesn't mean there's nothing being used at all.
Right. And I wanted to clarify just on that with synthetic as well. So there's synthetic inputs in organic, but for example, one of those examples is newspaper mulch is considered a synthetic input. So even with this language of like synthetic, it just means it's a man-made derivative like newspaper, but technically it's paper from a tree, but we've added print to it and some ink. So that could be a synthetic input in organic. So again, it's very minimal, and it can even be very inert. So a lot of what is going into organic is also being tested for kind of void of being adverse long term, right? It's this idea of, I'd rather get like a citronella spray in my eye. Of course, it's going to irritate. Citronella is the extract of citrus that is used as a pesticide. Sure, that would irritate my eye. That's really going to hurt my face, and I'd probably get red, and it would not feel good. But it's probably not going to be an endocrine disruptor, or it's not an endocrine disruptor. It's been studied and tested. It breaks down in the soil and in the environment very quickly, versus getting 2,4-D or another type of very heavily synthetic pesticide used in conventional, right? Glyphosate. I wouldn't want to get glyphosate or 2,4-D in my eye, which has been shown to be an endocrine disruptor and have long-term effects and side effects, right? So very, very different things here of like long-term chronic exposure and then short-term acute like injury, just like getting soap in your eye, right? So yeah, I know there's a lot of context behind this, but good point in terms of we hit a lot there, like the cost and everything else. But yeah.
There's two things that come to mind when you were saying that, Dahlia, which is first, it's a great opportunity to get to know, like you said, the local people that is growing stuff, and that we're actually helping locally with the economy, right? We're buying from these small farms and people that actually take good care of it, and then it's just like basically farm. They just grow it and then they show it in their farmers market. And also, it's just we're intending to do how nature is supposed to be, right? We are supposed to be eating seasonally for a reason. And when we're trying constantly to get our strawberries in times where strawberries aren't grown in that specific region, then of course we're going to be paying the prices, the shipping, and all of that adds to the food price. So if you went locally and you consumed foods that are seasonal, then that price will drop significantly. And the other thing that came to mind was how many times we don't realize that, yes, organic stuff may seem more expensive when we go to the grocery store compared to the conventional, but many times what we don't realize is that we've paid with taxes the price of the conventional stuff. Like they don't show us how it's done. It's already taken, we already do that by paying taxes. But with the organic part, you see the full price, right? So it's basically, I don't know, it's like it's one of those things that you gotta
Yeah.
know. And then, hey, if conventional is still like something that is more affordable, there's ways to eat this conventional part of
Yeah.
produce.
That's kind of like fast food. I think a lot of people don't realize that with fast food, that so
Yeah.
much of it and highly processed food, it's cheaper because it's actually subsidized by the government. And there is a lot that's put into these bills that are voted in every few years. The Farm Bill is one big one. But people realize that your tax dollars have prepaid for some of this. And maybe that's what you can afford. And there's no shame in that. If you're like, well, I've already prepaid for this stuff and that's in my budget, go for it. Sharing tips of if organic is not available in your region, if it's not in your budget, how you can reduce the pesticide residues that are on there if there's something that you're sensitive to or you're worried about because you have a risk factor. But yeah, I love that you bring that up, Laura. With people really don't realize that that is not the true cost a lot of the times with the conventional or highly processed food because so much of it has been subsidized.
It brings up the question, what if we subsidize organic food? What if we subsidize more broccoli and things like that?
But yeah, Katie, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to some of the conversation around buying local and speaking with your farmers. I think that is fantastic. But I just wanted to add for some of the Midwesterners out there, or if you live in a really cold climate like myself, I live in Illinois. We don't have year-round farmers markets. I wish we did, but we don't. And so this idea of like perfectionism around our food choices and guilt, like, oh, I don't have a farmer's market in December, January, February. What am I supposed to do? So things like simple tips of, buying frozen in the frozen section often will be less expensive than buying, like Laura said, the strawberries that are out of season or you can't get them locally. So kind of thinking a little bit creatively as to how you can come by some of these foods. Frozen foods are often also picked at the height of their freshness, of their ripeness. So they're probably better frozen than if you were to buy strawberries in February.
Love that. And yeah, like frozen canning. I mean, this is where the idea of canning and preserving came into, and really actually making preserves, right? It's in the Midwest or the East Coast where, the growing season is a lot shorter than here on the West Coast, right? Or in California. And so in that growing season, you may get, I mean, if you have one apple tree, for anyone out there who has a fruit tree, I mean, when it's apple season, you could be hit with pounds and pounds of apples. And it's like, what can you do with those? You can preserve some, you can dehydrate some, you can can some, you can freeze some. And that's what a lot of these growers do, right? And you can utilize all of that in various ways, a lot of times cheaper than having to import something. I mean, now there's like these exotic fruit deliveries and things like that, which can get very, very pricey, but you don't necessarily have to do that. So that's a wonderful point. And it goes back to kind of the ancient wisdom mixed with modern technology a little bit, and going back to that or finding that locally, because I guarantee there's someone in your community who's canning or selling some really great glass jars full of great preserves that would be highly nutritious for sure. So
yeah, and I love that idea of either purchasing it frozen when it's out of season or freezing it yourself. Like pomegranates, I love buying large cases of pomegranates when they're in season in the fall, and then peeling them and keeping them in the freezer to use throughout the year in different things, because out of season, they're so expensive because they're labor intensive. You're not going to find a whole pomegranate that's local out of season. It's usually peeled, and you'll find it in like a little container at Trader Joe's when it's been peeled for you. A lot of work has been put into that. We all know how much of a pain in the butt peeling pomegranate is. So you're going to pay for that. They had to use a machine or, something to peel those. So things like that. Yeah. Strawberries, when they are in season, like James said, the farmers grow them in abundance. So they're going to grow them at a more affordable price. So whether you are getting it from your farmer's market, a CSA, your local grocery store, you can even freeze it yourself if having it fresh in season is more cost effective. And then you're kind of preserving it on your own.
Loving it. I'm seeing a lot more questions come in. I love it. And then We have another one. Can you tell a bit more about EU organic products and US organic product regulations for consumers' point of view?
Wow.
So we're getting some like you guys are really into this topic. So that was great. And that's kind of going back to like the regulations. Overall, I kind of did touch on that with EU and USA. I will say this, I mean, for the most part, the EU has banned, I mean, we're very similar, but the EU, like again, is very strict. So they've banned over 26 different pesticides and counting. One of the biggest ones I'll say is neonicotinoids. That I don't know if anyone has heard of that, or comment down below if you've kind of heard of this. This got a lot of attention at some point because they found neonicotinoids, that class of pesticide. Technically, it falls under an insecticide. It kills pollinators like bees and butterflies, and we know it kills our pollinators, which we rely on for all this, or not all, but a significant amount of these foods that we enjoy, right? So the EU has banned that as well as many other countries, but not the US, not the gold US of A. We're still using and spraying neonicotinoids, right? So that's one example. Again, so the EU kind of sets their own standards. They have their own kind of structure in terms of how companies like pesticide manufacturers can lobby that government and kind of help them develop policy. So the EU seems to be a little more strict on that. Other things the EU does as well is right now, the total farmland in Europe or the European Union is about 8% organic. Compare that to the US, which is only 1% organic. And the EU has a goal to become 25% organic, I think by 2035 or something like that, or and beyond. Not sure they'll hit that, but they have that goal. We really don't have a goal, right? So it'd be great. I think it's interesting to see a lot of other countries see the benefits in organic, and I think a lot of the research is catching up, and more research is showing that. And it kind of goes into some of the other questions we'll hit, but yeah, that's where the EU differs, and there's a lot more differences that kind of lean towards the idea of the precautionary principle, right? So this is a principle that says if we don't really know how this is going to go, or what, especially in regards to a chemical, maybe we'll wait to see. We'll kind of not use that for now, do some more testing, and then use it. The US is a little bit different where we go, it's generally recognized as safe. We have a chemical like it. Let's go ahead and use it. And if we get a lot of issues with it, then we'll ban it. And it'll take about 30 years to do so. So that's typically like the timeline in the US when it comes to things like that.
And I think that speaks to more than just pesticides. I think we do that in the US a lot with medication and different things like that, where, yes, we have more abundant medications available here in the US, which is, in a lot of instances really great. Whereas just a small fraction is available in other countries. But I think the same can happen with different medications as well, of like, we did study it and we tested it and we put it out, but actually we're finding a lot of adverse events from it. And that doesn't always happen. But I think when you just have a higher number of things being put out, you have a higher chance of those things happening. And, I think it also comes down to risk factors for people.
Yeah.
And then bioindividuality, because everyone's going to eradicate or detoxify pesticides differently, right? We all have detox organs in our bodies, our kidney, our liver, we have our lungs, we have our skin. So we're all detoxifying, but we do know, different people have different affinity, different capacity, and then different people have different genetics. And, I know James can really speak to the studies that have associated different types of cancer with elevated pesticide use in just certain instances. So, maybe if you are somebody who's at risk for, I want to say breast cancer was one of them, then maybe it's something to consider to see how often can I include organic, should this be a priority for me, or is that really not even something that I'm at risk for? So maybe not even something I'm going to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that I would add to that, Dahlia, is like, what's my toxic burden,
Mm.
If I'm already, if I'm drinking tap water, if I'm already like living in a city that is polluted, if I'm, all of these little
in a moldy building
things that add up, and then just not buying the organic fruit, it's like the cherry on top of everything that can then maybe create a cascade of things, then it's just really asking, well, where can I mitigate it and what can I reduce? Maybe it's through food, but maybe it's also through your air, maybe it's your water.
Or maybe you live,
in your makeup, your all of it, right?
And maybe you're on the other side. Maybe you're like, I live in a rural area and the air is clean. There's not a lot of pollution. It's not a priority for me and it's not accessible for me. So I think everybody needs to make those choices, but have the information, because I think we were just saying this earlier, when people are so passionate on either side of it, where they're like organic or die, or, I'm going to buy it organic or I'm just not going to eat the food at all. Or on the other side where people are saying organic's a scam and, it's a money grab. I think that on either one of those extremes, such as any case in life, you're not allowing people to really come to a conclusion on their own or really assess their own personal situation. So that way they can say, okay, I'm going to prioritize this or I'm not going to prioritize it because I know that I'm making this from an informed place. And this is more of an informed decision rather than a peer pressured decision or a guilty decision or whatever it is. So I think that's so important too.
Yeah, I would agree. And I want to clarify, like, I do eat organic. I do believe in organic. Like I said before, I don't think organic is the end all be all. I don't think organic's perfect. Like, oh, certified organic is the gold standard. I think it's okay. It has flaws, but I think it's the direction I want to go in, and I want to continue in that direction, right? Like I've been to farmers' homes and local farms where they are better than certified organic. And I've got to experience that. Dahlia's got to experience that, where they are
What is that?
regenerative and biodynamic and all these other great words, permaculture, and they're amazing. Like they are growing amount of food I've never seen before, right? There's places in Southern California that are growing mangoes and papaya and mulberries, like things you're like, I didn't know could grow here. And because of how they're taking care of the soil is like abundant, like you've never seen before. So I see that aspect and I'm like, wow. But at the same time, I'm not going to be like, if I'm out traveling and I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to eat these vegetables because they're not organic. I'd rather, the benefit is still there. I'm going to eat the vegetables or the fruit. Even if I can't get it organic, I'm going to wash it really well and do whatever I can, because there's great studies to show that washing, especially washing in baking soda, can remove a lot of pesticide residues. So that's really great. And the benefit is still there to eat the produce, right? So just to be clear on that, but yeah.
I think that's a really important distinction to make, that the benefit is still there if conventional is the only thing you have access to, the only thing you can afford. And you can kind of think about it also as how much control you feel like you need to have over your food choices. And that can vary, of course. People can take that to an extreme as well. But if having a certain disease risk or having a certain condition and purchasing organic makes you feel better about how you're taking care of your health without added burden, of course, then do that. If it's something that maybe isn't in the cards for you, still have the produce and the, more conventional foods, and just do your very best that you can.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I would say, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I would just say that, the stress aspect, the perceived stress of it can also be harmful to you, as harmful as a pesticide, I want to say. It throws everything away. If you're stressing over and over about, I can't eat organic. What am I going to do? And all of these things is like rigidity and contraction. So
yeah. And then I have to add, on the other side of that, though, I think there's more and more data coming out. Like Bradbury, it's funny, two of the researchers, one was in 2014, another one 2018, and these were studies done in the EU on EU population, which we know has an even strict standard when it comes to pesticides. But there were clear associations with a reduce in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and breast cancer. So that's what Dahlia was mentioning. So those studies did have a strong association with that, and we're seeing that. I mean, it's very interesting when it comes to cancer and other diseases, and then what a pesticide burden can bring. And that's really what it is. It's not. I mean, there's some other studies that show organic has a little more polyphenols or vitamin C, and you'll get some things like that. Overall, though, it's really what you're not getting in organic, right? I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are going for. Oh, I don't want all of these artificial colors or heavy metals or synthetic chemicals that we're just not sure about. We haven't done the proper testing on yet. So I'd rather not have that. So when it comes to organic, it's more of what you're not getting than what you are getting. And again, I see kind of both ends of the spectrum. And that's where we're right in the middle of going, yes, we need to do more research on this. We need to I want to go down this path. I do love the precautionary principle. I'm in favor of that because I'd rather be safe than sorry a lot of the times. Especially when we know, and a lot of these studies we ingest and we also look at a big picture and go, look, we know we have lobbyists in this country. We know companies lobby our government to get their way. That's why companies spend millions and millions of dollars on lobbying. That's why the farm bill sometimes doesn't make sense. I've said many times the USDA it's a schizophrenic person, right? Because on one hand, the USDA helps, for example, fund childhood obesity campaigns, right? They have grants that fund public health initiatives when it comes to obesity and diabetes and all these great things. And then on the other hand, they subsidize sugar and cheese, and they subsidize all these things that we know contribute to obesity and diabetes. So it's hard. It's hard when we know entities in our government serve two masters, and you really can't serve two masters, right? So this is where the conflict we kind of see happens, and it's important context as researchers and health professionals to get that full picture and realize, oh yeah, lobbyists are essentially legal bribery, and we have to know that happened, and there's legislation to prove that is happening, right? So that's a whole political rabbit hole, but
so maybe that resonated with you. Maybe you're someone like, and that's why we in our family, we personally eat organic. My mom had breast cancer 2 separate times in her life. I have 3 maternal aunts who have had breast cancer, several maternal cousins. I'm at risk for breast cancer, and they're BRCA negative. So even though I don't have that genetic component with the BRCA gene, I still have that genetic propensity with my, genetic makeup, my body composition makeup, things like that. So we choose to eat organic because of those reasons. Like, we've done the research. For us, it's been a beneficial thing, and it's within our resources. But that might not be the case for everybody. So I think this discussion is almost similar to when people who are like 100% vegan will debate somebody who is, Mediterranean diet, or somebody who is paleo. And it's like, at the end of the day, I think we agree, like, let's eat more whole foods. Let's eat, less processed and packaged foods. I think with organic, it's the same. James used to tell people, like, organic sugar can still give you organic diabetes, right? Like, it's still sugar at the end of the day, just without the added pesticides on top of it. So, I think when you look at it like that and you're like, okay, overall low-hanging fruit, let's eat our produce. Let's eat fiber.
Let's eat the low-hanging fruit.
Eat the low-hanging fruit, literally. When it's available, great. We can go for the frozen, the canned. We can go for local when it's available. We can go for conventional if organic is not within your resources or it's just not available. And then we're going to have that intention of eating less hyper-processed food, because risk or no risk, all of us are going to benefit from that. And then with that hyper-processed food, I think what a lot of people don't realize as well is, if you are going to eat hyper-processed foods, this would be a time where I would say, if it's again available in your resources, perhaps to consider purchasing organic, because it's not just that they are produced with less synthetic pesticide. Under the USDA organic label, something that is organic is also not genetically modified. So the seeds are not genetically modified, if someone's worried about that. There's also no artificial dye when it's USDA organic. There's no artificial preservatives, artificial flavors. There's no high fructose corn syrup. There's no artificial sweeteners allowed when it's labeled as USDA organic.
It sounds like a list of everything I ate as a
hormones.
child.
Yeah. Yes, seriously. So,
90s kid.
again, that would be, if you're like, well, my kids eat cereal every single morning, then that might be the time where you're like, okay, maybe I'm going to prioritize a cereal that is organic. So I know I'm not sending them off to school with, artificial dyes and artificial sweeteners or, any of those other energy disrupting and endocrine disrupting things added. So I think that's also important to recognize that with organic. And again, just assess how that fits into your life, just so you have that information.
All right, we have more questions. I'm gonna keep going. This is the next question, but budget buys, keeping fresh, growing tips, top 5 you should easily grow at home instead of spending money on. I know the 15 list of fruits and vegetables, but what about other foods? Thanks, I'll have to watch. Interesting. Okay. So I'll just comment because I saw this question and I was like, if you want to grow at home, get some organic seeds and not even seeds, really, lentils and like sprout. You can get a sprouting kit probably at your local farmer's market or on Amazon or almost any local store or health food store. Sprouting kit and sprout. That's probably like the easiest thing to grow at home. You can
use a sieve, whatever you call it.
The mesh strainer.
Strainer.
Yes. If you have at home, I've done that before.
Perfect.
Cheesecloth and like a mason jar.
Or a towel, as long as it's dark.
Yeah. And so that's probably so easy. Like you can sprout chickpeas and lentils and broccoli seeds. And I mean, you can sprout a lot of things, but
and herbs. I would say herbs might be a secondary option where, even if you don't have an outdoor space.
Check your windows for light.
Windowsill. Yeah. That could be a nice little basil plant or tomato that you have there.
Yeah.
Onions, it's a good one. Like you can buy them at the store organic, and then you just cut them, and then you just, instead of throwing away the little root, you can just put it back into the water and it just grows again. Or put it in
the green onions.
Yeah, the green onions. You can do that with carrots as well. If you don't throw away the last part and you put it in water, it starts growing like the sprout.
Yeah, you can also do that with romaine lettuce as well. Just don't cut. If you buy them like with the base on it, you can just cut that part off and put that in soil if you have like a yard or just a little pot.
Yeah, or just water. Yeah.
One thing that's really fun is when I forget about potatoes and they start to sprout, I throw them in a planter and you could literally grow a bunch more potatoes. I've done that. That was really fun to do. Layla really likes it. And if it's sweet potato, the greens are delicious. You can eat the greens like spinach. And then you take one potato that's kind of going bad and it's a little soft and it's sprouting, throw that in some dirt. It grows it multiplies it by 20. You get some new potatoes and some greens. That was really fun to do. It's so easy. And I will say, if you do have a backyard or a front yard, Google native perennials. That is what I call lazy gardening. So if you Google native perennials in your area, perennials mean you don't have to replant them. Like you plant them once and they will just keep providing as long as you have the right climate. Just check your climate. That's why it should be native to your area and it'll just keep growing. I love that. That's my jam, is like native perennials where you plant it once and that's it. You don't have to always replant it every year. That's called annuals. So cool question. I like that.
I see another question too. Someone is asking about the validity. They're saying there is an organization who recommends clean 15, dirty dozen. What are our thoughts?
Yeah, lots of questions on that. Is dirty dozen still valid? Is it true that organic marked produce can still have pesticides? A lot with dirty dozen, EWG. You wanna?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
And do you all have any thoughts or things you've heard also about the EWG's clean 15, dirty dozen?
What I've heard is just, for example, bananas, which I gave this example at the beginning. They have like this big, thick peel that protects them, because you're not eating the peel, you're eating the flesh inside. So fruits that have like a big protector, I think, are a little bit more shielded from pesticides than strawberries, for example. It's just the raw skin that is absorbing everything. Same as potatoes, they just absorb everything. But if they have a hard shell, I think is not as bad. I think that would be like a rule of thumb, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I view it as well. Or if you're not going to eat the peel, for example, like on a lemon or on citrus, I tend to kind of say that that's likely to be fine to have.
Yeah. And some of the examples of those that are on the Clean 15, if you're referring to that, avocados, sweet corn that you have to pull back, the husk of pineapples, onions, papayas, honeydew melon, cantaloupe, mangoes, watermelon, and then kiwi and sweet potato are on here. I like to eat the kiwi skin, so that makes me
And
want that.
And yeah,
It's
with
good
the
fiber.
EWG, the
Yeah.
EWG isn't technically doing all this research. They're just pulling data from the USDA and from the EPA. So they're pulling our own government data. And really what they're doing is they're looking at which data sets have the most pesticides, right? That's really what they're doing. So they get these clean 15, dirty dozen. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. But those are clever names that work really well and are easy to remember. But essentially they're just looking at the amount of pesticide residue that they're finding on and in sometimes those items. So, and that's where they'll come up with these lists. So,
And that's why it changes every year, because
right.
that can change year to year depending on soil conditions and depending on farming conditions. So every year they'll publish a list. And like we said, most of the ones that are on that list, they have a pretty protective layer on them already. So, if you are going to cut into it, use one of those techniques that we mentioned, just rinsing them off pretty thoroughly. You can soak things in vinegar. You can soak them in salt water, baking soda. If you are someone who's concerned, maybe you have even a little scrub brush, but that's going to remove a large majority of the pesticides that are on there if you're not buying those things organic. Some of the other ones, they just don't need to be sprayed because they're bitter and bugs don't want to even eat them. So mushrooms, cabbage, asparagus, bugs aren't really trying to infiltrate on some of those things. So they just don't need to be sprayed quite as much as some of the other things. But ones on the dirty dozen that they've identified are usually things you're eating the entirety of, and they include a lot of berries because they're sweet and bugs are really going to go after those. And then things with like pits and ridges. So things like celery that has all those ridges in it. The pesticides, again, there's just more surface area when you have all those ridges and all those pits. So, if you are even rinsing it or soaking it, it's going to be just a little harder to take off. So they've identified that as a dirty dozen item. Strawberries are the same. There's all those little pits and ridges. You see things like blueberries, cherries, grapes, tomatoes, peaches that are fuzzy, nectarines, and a lot of greens, spinach, kale, collard, and mustard greens, because you're generally going to eat the entirety of those things. So again, if you can buy those things organic, and if it's an option for you, they're suggesting to try to buy these things organic because they're going to be more heavily sprayed.
I'll add, going back to the banana comment, here's where it's really cool. Is a lot of data, and we're very microbiome driven, especially gut microbiome, where now they're calling it a microbiome based approach to agriculture, which is really cool to see. This is fairly new fairly new in terms of in the research aspect in the last decade, where you're also thinking about the microbiome around the plants and on your farm and in the soil, right? A lot of people don't know this, but really soil is the most diverse habitat on this planet, right? So think about that for a second. Like, we're not talking about the Amazon or the Great Barrier Reef, or think of another ecosystem or habitat. We're talking about the soil that could be in your backyard or on a local farm. The soil is the most diverse ecosystem we have on this planet, which is really cool to think about. And so when you take this approach, it's like, yeah, the banana has a peel, or Dolly's mentioned the clean 15, the pineapple, and you can peel it, but you can't peel the soil, right? Like, if they're being sprayed, we have to also think about what is happening to the soil. How big is this land we're talking about? How much land are we spraying, and how many we're actually using millions and millions of pounds of pesticide each and every year. And what is that doing to our groundwater and our water and our soil? So,
And our farm workers.
and our farm workers, right? It gets into so many aspects. So taking this microbiome based approach is saying, hey, if it's good for the microbes in the soil, then it's probably good for larger organisms up the food chain, so to speak, right? So that's really cool to see more studies talking about this and really get into the weeds of this, pun intended, and showing that, like, if we're taking care of the soil, we will be taken care of. It really goes to what we've been saying of, if you really take care of the smallest organisms and creatures, you're taking care of all the creatures, right? If you're taking care of your inner ecosystem, you're taking care of all the ecosystems, right? So if it's good for your gut microbiome and the soil microbiome, it's good for all microbiomes on this planet. So that's something to consider of, like, that's why I do buy the organic bananas, I'll admit, because I'm thinking, like, the farm workers that pick those bananas, the soil, the animals around that banana farm, like, it's not just the banana that's getting sprayed, they're all getting sprayed as well, right? So something to think about. And for me, I'm always big, I like to really encourage people, vote with your dollar. If you feel like, man, our government, why are they doing this in the farm bill? And oh man, I don't have a social media platform. I don't know what to do. I only have 100 followers. It's like, you vote every day with what you spend your money on. These companies have power and lobbying power and manipulate the farm bill based on the money they receive from us, right? So that's something to also consider as well.
Mm-hmm. But if at the end of the day you're like, it's just not in my budget,
Yeah,
then
totally.
we definitely want people walking away knowing they're doing their best. So
That is good cop on bad cop in this scenario. Like,
well, I think, as dietitians, it's our responsibility to just bring that balanced
Totally.
approach. So I think it's presenting the data and presenting the facts, but also bringing that balance, because I love what Laura said. At the end of the day, stress is toxic too. So if you are walking around carrying all this stress and guilt around about it, you're going to have to let it go and find your balance between those two things and just say, you know what, it's not in my budget right now. Maybe it will be in the future, but if it's not, I'm going to release this stress and I'm going to just continue to do my best with what I have. I learned today I can soak in salt water, I can soak in vinegar. Maybe I'm going to soak in baking soda or scrub things off, or I'm going to buy when they're in season. Maybe I can afford that when it's organic and freeze them. I'm going to look at the freezer section. I'm going to price processed things out per ounce and see, is it actually cheaper to maybe buy it organic? But if, at the end of the day, that's not an option, let it go and just know you're doing your best every single day. Yeah. Anything to add to that, Katie and Laura? We always love hearing from you.
I think I saw like a comment which was interesting that piqued my eye was how we're not only ingesting the physical part of food, we're also ingesting the energy of this plant. And, it's just like humans, what type of environment these seed grow. So at the end, that's what we are ingesting. And so one of the comments was, I'd go to the extent of only buying organic grown in a greenhouse. High vibrational energy is needed for the pineal gland. So I think it's very interesting because although, like you were saying, everything in balance, right? But it's also kind of looking and relating ourselves to food in a different way that is not just the physical and just calories in, calories out, but it's also like the environment the seed is growing in and the energy it's absorbing and the nourishment and the nutrients that it's taking from it. And at the end, that's what you're going to be eating as well. So just to have in mind, if it's still not in your budget, that's also okay. You can do a prayer and just put the intention. But yeah,
I love that. That's such a great perspective, Laura, and because this can go so deep, guys. Like this goes so deep. We know seeds have unique DNA. We know seeds adapt. That's why there's native plant species, because they spent hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years adapting to this surrounding, right? The energies, the inputs, like even our inputs into a garden, we know, I mean, there's physiological effects that happen when you spend time in the garden, right? You are exchanging energy with that garden, with the soil, with the wildlife, with the plants you're touching and breathing and then eating even. And when you think about it, it's really, really cool because it's a full circle. And I don't know if we talked about it here or maybe on another podcast, but when you think about it really, right, you are picking the fruit, let's say you eat it, you interact, it interacts with your gut microbiome and your body microbiome. What do? We then poop, and then that poop technically goes right back into the soil, right? And it gives those inputs right back, and then we repeat the cycle again. So we are meant, I know this is like a weird, but this goes into other, I mean, there's so much here, but really for a long time, guys, we've had humanure, right? It's like manure, but human-based manure. Like really the idea of having a bowel movement in clean, potable water is something we've only done recently. Everything before that, and there's still countries that don't do that. We defecate in the ground, right? Our poo is supposed to go back into the soil because it's taking microbes with it. It's taking data back with it into the soil to give that data to the soil microbiome. And then that data goes back into the plant, literally to tailor the plant and the seeds and the fruit based on the people that are eating it. Really crazy stuff.
Far out concept. I think ideal world. I don't know that I'd want to be eating the medications and other things coming
That's
out
where
of
we
people.
mess it up, right? That's where it gets really messed up.
We're around in so many, but
you can see it in the example of like, have you seen where they take mushrooms and then they put like certain, they elicit these frequencies like music. Have you seen that video?
Yeah.
How they put in, yeah. And
That's so
imagine what
cool.
it's doing inside of you. We don't see these. We can only see so far, but there's this mechanism inside that, I don't know, energetically and stuff like that is just going on.
Yeah.
So,
and then
it's
you
cool.
bring your own energy to the plate too. So again, I think always bringing it back to that of, if you're going to bring this negative energy, but you know, you're expecting this high vibration from your food, I think that's something to consider as well. So I think it's finding that peace. It's being informed. It's being realistic with your resources and your accessibility to things. It's making those decisions for yourself. Maybe something stood out to you today and you're like, hey, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma really runs in my family. I might look into this a little bit more, or maybe I'm going to start following the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, or, you know, I'm going to intend to buy organic when I can. Maybe I have a family member who's a farm worker, and that's important to me that, you know, if I start buying organic, others will too. And my family members exposed to less of these synthetic pesticides. So, you know, resonate with what you want to resonate with and leave the guilt behind.
Preach it. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Amen.
I love it.
I love it.
These were great questions.
Yeah. I think, a lot of them are saying the same question different ways. I mean, I think we hit on like we hit a lot. So I think this was good. A lot of great questions coming in. Again, it works out great. I know we could be on here for another hour, but want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know that this lives can go long, but I love it. And yeah, this was a great topic. Again, comment down below if you guys want another topic similar to this. If you have other questions on organic, keep an eye out for our shorts and our clips coming, because I know these lives can go long, so we like to shorten them up, and we will throw them out there on our YouTube.
Where can people find more resources? I think that's a good question as well. That
Wonderful.
If they want to learn more about organic, who are some organizations that are, you know, non-biased and, you know, where they can understand just unbiased information on organic or conventional?
You know what? I mean, I guess I don't know if you could call them unbiased, but they control a lot of things. But USDA, like your tax dollars are at work, right? USDA.gov, and you search for organic, they'll give you why the USDA has a certified organic program, right? They go into Organic 101. They teach you on what's inorganic and what's not inorganic and why, and the research behind it. So like your own tax dollars are funding this education on organic. Take a look. Other than that, we talked about EWG.org. They're a nonprofit organization who's really just, again, taking that data and making it more digestible for the public, right? Because not everyone's going to be like, yeah, I went on the USDA.gov website and I was analyzing all the data and looking like, okay, so that's where you have these nonprofits kind of translating it a bit easier and putting these nice graphics of clean 15, dirty dozen, it's still coming from the USDA. So I think those are two big resources for sure.
And one that I learned about from James, if you just want to learn more about organic farming and the difference between regenerative, organic, veganic, all these different terms that James uses that none of us know what they mean, there's the Rodale Institute.
Yeah.
So
Rodale Institute is great.
They have great resources, education. They are constantly running studies, and they have lots and lots of land that they study conventional versus organic.
Get into all that.
And yeah, but I think that's a really cool resource for anybody who's interested.
Yeah, Google vegetable systems trials. So there's ongoing trials of like side-by-side comparisons, really, really cool data coming out of there. We see some other comments too. Again, I don't know how unbiased, but Center for Food Safety, I know they're a nonprofit. And then Organic Consumers Association is also a nonprofit. I think they're pretty unbiased, but I don't think I think I'm getting them confused. There are trade associations of like organic, I forgot what they're called, but they're like all the companies that are organic. And obviously, I mean, organic companies and non-organic companies have these trade associations, and that can get a little dicey with how unbiased they are. But yeah, a lot of good Center for Food Safety, Organic Consumers Association. Yeah, we mentioned EWG. So those are great comments coming in.
I would add if you Google like for the local season, depending on your region, usually Google will tell you, well, these are the fruits and vegetables that are in season. And yeah, that's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Again, the USDA has a map also of what's in season, where your zone, your climate zone is, and what you can grow and what's in season. And it's there. Yeah. I mean, use the supercomputer in your hand and in your pocket and at home. And like, there's so much cool information. But I mean, if I had to just add, meet your local farmer. You'd be surprised at what people are growing around you. Even if you're in the Midwest or East Coast or West Coast, like there's someone growing something, or maybe someone's making a fermented something in their basement.
Or a farm nearby that you can order a CSA box from, or
CSA. Yep. So there's so much cool stuff for sure.
And if you're like, I live in a food desert, I don't know what you're talking about. Hopefully something that we talked about.
Then call up your senator and your representative and demand some. No, seriously. If you're in a food desert, call up your local representative and get some answers. But go ahead, Katie, you're going to say something?
I was going to say, I think it's also really important in these much more nuanced conversations that we have for somebody who might be feeling maybe overwhelmed is to just start with setting your intention. Maybe it's I'm trying to just wash my fruits and vegetables. Maybe you've never done that before. And that's a really great first step to take, because often those small little steps can really take you far. So start by setting your intention, whether it's just adding more fruits and vegetables before even getting into this conversation of what type do I choose. You have to start somewhere, just like everybody else.
I love that.
Katie always brings us back to reality.
Yes. I was just going to say, you're bringing it all back together to the little things matter, which is what James started this
beautiful
live today.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Seriously, little things matter. So that's
they do.
A wonderful reminder.
Our intentions, all of it.
Wonderful reminder. So thank you everyone watching. For those that lasted this whole time, we thank you. We love you. This was a great topic. Dietitian Talk happens once a month, usually first Friday of the month. We also do a Good Gut Live, and then check out all of our other resources. If you want to connect with Laura and Katie, go to marriedtout.com, where you can make an appointment and learn more about them, connect to their socials through our website, and click down below for other goodies and resources. And if you have any questions, comment down below. And as always, heal with each meal.
Yes.
That's our
and feel with each meal.
And feel with each meal. There you go. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.